Welcome, peasants, to another edition of Sam Brags About His AirPods. Just kidding, peons. I would never talk to you about them. This is actually another edition of Sport Ball with Squam, Stogie, and Skulldog. I'm your boy Sam. With me, as always, are these two, I don't want to say gods, maybe Adonises, Odonai. Seth and Kyle, welcome, boys.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
How are your states and minds?
I'm pretty much, since our last podcast, reborn again because I've gone viral.
Kyle, tell all our 5 listeners, which should have turned into thousands of listeners, but didn't somehow. Tell them about how you went viral.
So post game 1 of the Boston Celtics series, as we all know, Boston clapped those cheeks like we all knew they would.
We'll talk about that later as well.
And if you haven't seen the old LeBron James meme of wearing a do-rag and a cigarette,
Well, this
and then
cigarette was
some words.
photoshopped in.
Yes, both.
Don't smoke, kids.
Yeah.
Because LeBron doesn't.
I took a picture of Al Horford post-game, photoshopped a do-rag and a cigarette in his mouth, and said, Ante Antetokounmpo, Auntie got a poodle, Greek freak, Greek yogurt, don't matter, Celtics in 4. I've reached 8,000 likes and over 3,000 retweets. So you're welcome to be in my presence today.
I'm surprised he's still even here. I thought he'd be in the Bahamas by now with a top hat and a smile and nothing else.
No, I'm just here with my soft white wine.
The Greek yogurt. And Kyle seems to be drinking some sort of grape juice.
It's the soft white wine.
Some sort of fermented grape juice.
It is refreshing, fresh from the vine taste, with hints of sweet peach and mango, and the gentlest of honeysuckle.
Oh, I love my honeysuckle gentle, that's for sure.
I'm going to suckle your honey gently tonight, I'll tell you that much. So we have a lot to go over in this podcast. Also, we're all going to be watching the Warriors-Blazers game that's going on right now, so if we're distracted at any point, that's why.
But that's how I am on every podcast, so it should be the same for me.
That's how sad this. Also, me and Kyle are already at odds because I'm wearing a Draymond Green jersey, so if it seems tense, that's why.
At odds is an understatement, I would say.
You're right, at evens, probably.
Yeah, at evens, at least.
Kyle rolled his eyes at that one. That's when I know I've made a good pun. So here's what we want to go over in this episode. Sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
What was I going to say?
Good, I flustered him.
Someone's name today at work that another person was calling. Her name was Lisa Turtle, and I turned to him. I said, "Ask her how much." No one laughed.
Ask her how what?
Ask her how much.
Oh, to Lisa Turtle?
Yes. I was sitting there almost crying to myself, and no one laughed at all.
What do you think is a fair price for that? Like $1,500 a year?
At the minimum.
Like
it depends on, I guess, the size of the turtle.
Right. It has to. Maybe you would say like $100 per year per square inch of turtle.
That sounds right. It's probably how you.
I mean, that's what my
life insurance
going
too.
rate is, but I don't know how my competitors price it.
I think that's how life insurance is priced on a turtle.
All right, so we have a lot to go over this episode. How I have it titled is the NBA lottery reaction playoff second round recap. Semifinals
round
preview.
Recap.
Yeah, it actually says toast round recap. Semifinals preview. Holy shit, Kawhi, I have a semi. Podcast 5/14/2019. So should we just end it there? I think that that's enough. So I really thought Seth was going to laugh when I said I have a semi, but he didn't even giggle at all.
I actually did, but my Wi-Fi was like going out for a second, so that everything you were saying was in slow motion, but then it made it even more funny when you said I had a semi.
I had a slow motion semi. So let's go over the lottery, which just happened. So we're recording this at 9:30 on Tuesday, May 4th. Central Standard Time. And the lottery just completed. Keep in mind, this is just picking the lottery, not the actual draft. I was watching it with Cassie, and it ended. She was like, okay, so that's it? What? Are they going to pick the players? I was like, oh, no, it's actually much shittier than you thought. This is all. So the Pelicans got the first pick. Let's not sugarcoat it.
6% chance to get it.
Yeah. Right. So the NBA, to explain a little further, the NBA changed the odds this year so that the top 3 teams don't have as much of a chance of getting the top 3 picks. So even if you were one of the 3 worst teams in the league, which were the Knicks, the Cavs, and the Suns, all of them only had a 14% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, whereas in past years it's been, I think, around 25. And so the odds were a little more even, a little more spread out. And so the Pelicans, who I'm not sure what their odds, Kyle, were, do you know, it was like 6%, and they got the first pick. And the Memphis Grizzlies got the second pick. And so it didn't play out exactly, as the standings would predict, which is what the NBA definitely wanted, right? So I think they had to be happy with this first-year result. So let's talk about the Pelicans and what this means for them. So we assume they're going to take Zion Williamson if they keep this pick, right? And it's funny to me because the last time we had a no-brainer number 1 overall pick was Anthony Davis, and he was also picked by the New Orleans Pelicans, and they bungled that 7 years later, and now they have a chance at another no-brainer number 1 pick, which I just don't think seems fair. But, happy for the people of New Orleans, I guess, but fuck them.
He's going to look great in the Smoothie Dome or whatever they're playing.
Smoothie King Center?
Yeah.
I'm going to say something. I
know. I was enthralled by now? You chugging a glass of ice. This pick is huge, actually, because reports came out today via The Athletic and our boy Shams that if the Knicks got the number 1 pick, they were going to go after Anthony Davis with it. So the Knicks don't have the number 1 pick. The Pelicans locked down Zion without having to give up Anthony Davis for him.
Right.
Reports also came out that Anthony Davis still wants out of New Orleans. So, I don't think they're going to keep him. I would put it like 98% chance they trade him. So where does he go? Now, in my opinion, the Lakers kind of have the best package on the board again. They don't have to give up as many young players, and they can give up the 4th pick in the draft and Lonzo, and then to get the salary to fit, you're gonna have to give up, I don't even know, because everyone was on 1-year salaries, so they're gonna have to sign someone and trade for Anthony Davis. So I think the Pelicans end up with 2 top 5 picks this year and get rid of Anthony Davis, and one of those top 5 picks being the most electric man in basketball, Zion Williamson.
I don't know if I'm ready yet to say that they're definitely not going to keep Anthony Davis because they got a new GM, right, who maybe Anthony will be more willing to work with. And they're getting Zion, which maybe Anthony will be excited to play with him.
He said today he wants out.
Well, he didn't know they were going to get the number 1 pick. That might change things in his mind.
I think I'm just saying that I wouldn't put it after the draft, though. Let me tell you.
Oh, really? Even so, though, if I was New Orleans, I'd be like, well, I don't have to trade. So the thing is, New Orleans, they don't have to trade Anthony Davis, and they also just got the number 1 draft piece that was out there. They got for themselves. So if I'm New Orleans, I'm saying I hold all the chips here. I'm not going to do anything unless it really blows me away because I don't have to trade you under contract.
Yeah, but then they just have they have an entire year of Anthony Davis basically not trying and sitting, every 4 games again?
There has to be some sort of...
in the second half. So that report did come out after the draft. Anthony Davis' stance on trade has not changed.
So is there... I don't actually know this. If it comes to a head, right, and New Orleans is like, well, we're not going to trade you, and Davis says, I'm not going to play, does he get fined every game he sits out?
I don't know. I don't think we've ever seen that before.
Ostensibly, he should have some sort of punishment for that, right?
Yeah, but like I said, I don't think we've ever seen that before. I guess Kawhi, but he was technically out with an injury in San Antonio, right?
Right.
My take is I don't think it seems like the Pelicans really don't want to trade him to the Lakers after everything that they pulled last year. Plus, there's all of the concerns around Brandon Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the Pelicans are valuing the 4th pick. Obviously, that's a pretty significant trade piece, but I don't know. The rest of their assets have questions around them for sure. It would be interesting to see what the Celtics are willing to offer. How valuable is Jason Tatum now?
So
I would like to trade Kyrie for Davis, but that doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
You would trade Kyrie for just a piece of soil.
Here's the thing with that option. If they trade Kyrie, they're probably going to have to package what I just read about in our time waiting was the 2020 pick that the Celtics are getting from Memphis, which is, I think, top 8 protected.
Mm-hmm.
So
then
really,
it rolls over till next year.
Once in 2021, I think it's unprotected. So
right. So if Memphis has another top 8 pick, then it could be unprotected the following year.
Exactly. And that could be a valuable piece in trying to get Anthony Davis. But again, he said he didn't want to go there. But like we know, he doesn't have a say. There's going to be a lot of moving parts this summer, and it's going to be nuts, I think.
So I have several questions for the crowd out there. Kyle, as a resident draft expert.
Thank you.
Who would go at number 4 projected right now?
I would guess either, since it's the Lakers, most likely going to be Jarrett Culver unless the Grizzlies or the Knicks fuck up with the other 2 shoe-in top draft picks in Ja Morant and RJ Barrett. So
yeah,
as we saw,
the thing for me is Jarrett Culver doesn't excite me that much.
I don't know, dude. Jarrett Culver has great size for the NBA. He's very smart. He's very agile. He knows how to score at the basket, and he knows how to shoot pretty damn well. That seems like a great player to put next to LeBron James as a young kid.
I don't know.
You're not going to get Anthony Davis.
I just feel like, for me, it seems like the top 3 picks are like guaranteed stars, and then after that, I wouldn't feel like any of them are that great of a piece in exchange for Davis. And like I watched Culver in the tournament, and he would just take a bunch of contested mid rangers and make some of them. He's a candidate for the next DeMar DeRozan, Seth.
No, he's got a 3-point shot, and he actually drives to the basket and finishes at the rim.
That's true. So I don't know. I just Culver wouldn't excite me that much.
Game.
He just wouldn't excite me that much in return for Davis. I don't know.
I mean, that wouldn't be the only piece they get, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. But I just think it's kind of poetic that the last time a pick like this came around to the Pelicans got them, and now they get a second shot and try not to mess it up this time.
Hey, we all deserve a second chance,
Not you.
It's going to be interesting if they, when they play Zion next to, this happens to me every single podcast.
Julius Randle?
Yes.
Basically,
Julius Randle on steroids.
He is actually taking steroids.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt, but that's an interesting combo. That's a pretty deadly front court.
They're like the same player, though. I wouldn't want Julius if I had Zion. He's just a worse version of Julius. I mean, worse. He's a worse. Wow. I mean, Julius is pretty fucking good.
Watch your mouth.
I'm talking Julius Irving, of course. Kyle just chugs wine. He says, "Watch your mouth," and just chugs his wine bottle. You know what? I'll say it. The Pelicans didn't deserve this. There, I said it. What have they done, huh? They squandered Anthony Davis's prime, and now they just waltz right into the number 1 pick. I don't like it. I'll be the first to say it. And I think now I hate New Orleans.
I'm glad this happened. Like you said, They wanted to do what they could to prevent tanking, so they spread out the odds to get the first pick. Only one team with the highest projected number 1 pick odds landed even in the top 3.
Yeah, it's true. The NBA has to be happy with this.
And
even though it's 2 small market teams.
Sam, in fairness to the Pelicans, it seems like they probably made a good decision, like starting to tank this past year, and like not really playing Davis much, because they're like, well, it's not going to work out for us this year, so we might as well give us some chance at number 1 pick, and 4% or 6% was all they needed.
Yeah, I know that was smart of them, but I hated it. I mean, it was just like either play him or don't. He played 20 minutes every game. There'd be close games in the fourth quarter, and he'd just be on the bench.
Hey, you don't got to tell me he was on my fantasy team.
Seth Davis was on your fantasy team.
Did anyone know
that?
I don't
have to tell you.
Our listeners. You don't have to tell me that.
Do you have any more thoughts on the lottery? Ja Morant, if Memphis picks him, could be interesting as a kind of Mike Conley replacement.
Please use
when
his
Mike
full
comes of age.
name.
When
Jonathan
Mike
Morant.
has his Jonathan Morant. When Mike Conley finally has his bat mitzvah, then Ja can take over.
I absolutely hate that Memphis ended up with that second pick, honestly. That's such a terrible offense for Ja to be put into, basically forced into.
That is true, yeah.
He plays best
they don't
when
even take him.
He plays best when he's playing up. Yeah, they might skip him for RJ. I wouldn't be surprised.
RJ would fit better than Mike.
Yeah, he plays best. Ja does when he's playing up-tempo basketball and can push the ball because his court vision is superior to any other player in this draft. And that's not the style of basketball that Memphis is going to play.
You know what's good is that we can be excited for Ja Morant or RJ Barrett going at number 3 to the Knicks, because the Knicks have no good players, so we can't say, oh, can you play with this player or this player? Well, it doesn't matter. They have no players, so.
RJ is going to shock everyone. Like, I know people were like, thought he was great in college. Wait until RJ Barrett is in the NBA and at a actual national like spotlight.
I mean, I was very impressed with him in the tournament.
I think it's going to be great. I think he's going to be incredible.
I think the top 3 players are going to be like all NBA caliber players. That's right. You heard it here first. But after that, I'm just not so sure. Maybe it's because I didn't watch a minute of college basketball, so I have no basis of knowledge to go off of.
You know, I watched
Kyle Quickly, Bulls number 7, which we've had for the last like 3 years.
Hey, if you're in Vegas and you're getting 777 on the slots, that's lucky. And that's how I'm looking at this. 3 number 7s in a row. Happy, more than happy with Lauri, who I think has higher potential than Jason Tatum, who everyone thought was like the next big superstar in the NBA.
He definitely has the potential to be the best Finnish player in the NBA.
I mean, he doesn't have the nickname the Finisher for nothing.
Right.
Then we follow that up with Wendell Carter Jr.
Keep in mind, he's 3 players.
And I think this year, the Bulls, what they're going to do is take the best point guard that's available to them. And at that spot, I'm really hoping for Kobe White.
Yeah, I would like
Carolina. Yeah, I mean, he's like we saw during the tournament, which is probably when most people watched him. Great 3-point shooter, great rebounder, and really knows how to push the ball. So,
plus he has great hair.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's more of a scorer than like an actual facilitator, but Zach LaVine showed us last year that he could actually do very well as a facilitator on the court. So that's not something I'm worried about. Offense was kind of what was troubling last year, and defense, obviously. But Kobe White isn't a slouch on defense. So yeah, I like that pick for the Bulls if he falls.
That would be nice. I think that's our biggest need. So, because Chris Dunn is just, I think we know who he is by now. He's done. Seth is literally not even paying attention. That joke would have killed if he was paying any attention. All right, let's move on. Seth's bored. All right. Next, we got the second round recaps, which I wrote twoist again somehow. And we got to go over Raptors 76ers. We got to go over Kawhi's shot. That was insane. It was the first Game 7 buzzer beater in NBA history. It hit the rim 4 times before it went in. And Embiid had great defense on that play, but Kawhi was just better. And it's one of the most clutch shots in NBA history, one of the greatest shots in NBA history. And, I don't know what else is there to say about it, boys.
There I was at my friend's place watching Game of Thrones. And I said, this is like the worst case scenario for me because Game of Thrones is on and Game 7 of an NBA playoff game is concluding during the episode. So I had my phone on my lap and I was just following like the game score on ESPN and I saw there was like 1 point game with 10 seconds left. I'm like, okay, I got to watch the rest.
Yeah.
So I just pulled it up on my phone and I see Kawhi shooting free throws. Misses, which now, of course, no one's talking about that.
And right, that could have been his fault that they lost.
Right. And Kawhi is a very good free throw shooter, so I was surprised. And then Jimmy makes that layup. So I was glad that I was able to see the last 10 seconds, probably the best 10 seconds of the playoffs so far.
For sure.
But Kawhi's a big-time player. He makes shots like that all the time. Obviously, there was a bit of luck with the way it bounced on the rim, but it was also like a makeable shot that he's for sure practiced before. So, hey, good for him for making that and making my prediction that Toronto would win the series correct. So, thanks, Kawhi.
Yeah, same. It was funny because I just watched it again today, or I watched the whole like last 5 minutes for the first time, and it's just funny to hear him interviewed after the game, right? He just hit a buzzer beater in a Game 7 for the first time in NBA history. And they're like, how'd you feel about that shot? He's like, felt pretty good,
Yeah, it was very emotional.
Why does he have to be like that?
The man's a robot. He did show some emotion right after hitting it, which I was actually a little surprised by.
It's just like he would be in the normal fans' argument for one of the best players in the NBA right now. If he was vocal at all, if he had some type of emotion, like if he did anything to just like, I don't want to say appease fans, but like if he did anything to do that,
give us something, Kawhi. I think he's even the layman still considers him, I'm sure, a top 5 player, right?
I don't know. Who talks about him? No one.
We're talking about him on this podcast right now. So it's us plus our 5 listeners, 8 people.
In-depth information.
So I was thinking about it today. I was trying to rank the top players in the NBA right now, like considering the playoffs and everything, you know? LeBron can't still be one, right? But he is on my list. Well, the only thing is, I feel like if he was in the playoffs, he would be the best player again, like it was last year. I mean, last year I was looking it up. He was 34-9-9 and 54% shooting for the playoffs. That's insane. And that was just last year, and like people are acting like he's like can't do that again. I feel like he could have if he wanted to.
He doesn't play defense anymore during the regular season.
Yeah, so it's hard to say, but and then you have to. I think Kevin Durant's top. I mean, I put him above Kawhi only because his playmaking is better. And I think he's just a little better. But then I think Kawhi probably is third. I don't know. I mean, he's got to be at least in the top 5. I mean, the only thing that would drop him at all, he's a better defender than pretty much anyone in the top 5. And he's...
Giannis.
Yeah, except for Giannis, exactly. And he's proven to be a clutch performer in the playoffs time and time again, which we definitely have to consider. And the only knock on him is that his playmaking isn't as good as others in the top 5, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to put too much on just one shot or anything or be too much a prisoner of the moment, and it was tough to talk about him this year because we didn't know what was happening with the injury, right? You know, and if he was going to be the same. But now that he's back, I think we have to be talking about him like a top 3 to 5 player.
I agree.
I think that top tier kind of keeps expanding. So we have like LeBron and KD.
Yeah.
That I feel like maybe 3 years ago were in a tier by themselves with
Right.
Steph 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Too. And now it's like Giannis is in that same tier. Kawhi's in the same tier. Harden is in the same tier.
And Jokic, and that's it.
And Jokic, yeah. I think that's it.
Embiid is knocking on the door sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
If he can stay healthy.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I wouldn't have too much of a problem like the order you rank any of those in the top tier, but I think you're right. There is a clear cut difference between about the top 7 and the rest, which I feel like there always is, right?
Yeah, I just think maybe it's like...
Yeah. But like Seth said, there's definitely more this year and currently in the NBA than there has been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the talent pool just keeps getting bigger.
And now we're about to add Zion to that list.
But I'm glad that we have these players that we know are going to take over for LeBron and KD and Steph as they age out, right? I mean, you have we had the Damian Lillard discussion. Jokic is young. Giannis is young. So I'm glad to see the league is going to be in good hands moving forward.
Right.
So outside of the Kawhi shot, what were your takeaways from the series? What do you think that Philly should be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Toronto's like? I was confused at how bad Toronto's bench was, and it just seemed like Kawhi was like their entire team.
Can I say one more quick thing about Kawhi before we move on?
Jeez,
this might be like maybe one of the best playoff series anyone's ever played. He scored the 3rd most points ever scored in a playoff series in NBA history, besides Kareem one season and Michael Jordan another season, which I've heard of them. They're pretty good players, I think. He averaged 34 and 10 on 54% shooting. So that's pretty good.
Pretty good.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, he's a real good player.
But the rest of his team is ass, huh, gang? Oh,
yeah,
while I have the floor, though. While I have the floor.
Here comes Marc Gasol.
I do need to make one quick Marc Gasol comment. Okay. Embiid in the regular season, 28 and 14 on 48% shooting. Wow, that's great. 28 points, 14 rebounds, 48% from the field. How efficient. What a player, right? In the second round against Marc Gasol, 18 and 8 on 36% shooting, which is atrocious. So I feel like they got Marc Gasol just for this series more than anything, and he made it worth it for them because they won, and that was a big reason why. Basically, I just want you to tell me that I'm vindicated.
I think you were probably right about that.
Oh my God.
There was a lot of people talking about how, I don't know what it ended up being after Game 7, but before Game 7, Embiid was like plus 80. Just like on the court, plus minus. The Sixers were plus 80 with Embiid on the court. So
that is true too.
I think
that's definitely a lot of a function of their backup centers as well, right?
Right. And I think he was still affecting the game. And maybe it's because Gasol was playing such good defense that he had to affect the game in other ways. And I'll be interested, we can get to this when we do the preview, but I'll be interested to see if Gasol is going to guard Giannis.
Yeah, I bet he doesn't.
No.
I bet it's
Kawhi or
Pascal, yeah. Marc is just probably too slow, right?
I don't know how much Mark's going to be able to play in that series, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, they have Brook, so I mean, does Brook really? I guess he does space the floor more than Embiid, but I have faith in Mark in covering that. But yeah, we'll cover that later. Let's talk 76ers real quick. Do you guys think they're going to make changes this offseason? Because Jimmy, Tobias, and JJ are all free agents. Brett Brown may be gone. Ben Simmons might be a problem.
There was a report that came out that Brett Brown's staying.
That's good. I don't think he should leave.
Yeah, same.
Just because Kawhi hit one of the hardest game-winning buzzer beaters of all time.
Right.
I don't think he should be out, but I think Jimmy Butler made his case to be signed for next year with this team, and Tobias, surprisingly, is the one that's in question as to whether they sign him or not. kind of the same with Ben Simmons. I mean, she showed flashes, but at the same time, he's not a player you can run out there in crunch time, run out there in the fourth quarter. He doesn't have a jump shot. I was talking to you guys about this, but what Ben Simmons needs is basically the same exact team that Giannis needs. He needs to be surrounded by 4 shooters that are going to space the floor so that while he has the ball in his hands, it's only him driving to the rim or him kicking out. That's what he needs to do. That's the only way that I think he succeeds as, one of the best, forms of himself in the NBA. Pick and roll with him and Embiid because he's not going to pop out. Embiid's not going to hit him. There's going to be 2 players rolling to the rim. What are you going to do? It's just too much. So I think really it comes down to Tobias and Ben Simmons, and obviously JJ's a free agent as well. So I don't know if they have the money to sign him unless they let Ben go.
Yeah, I think letting Ben go or trading him may be extreme just because he's only in his second year. I mean, you could certainly let him develop on your team and see where that goes. I think that it's interesting talking about Tobias and Jimmy. Maybe at the start of the year when they both got them, we thought Tobias was a better fit for the 76ers. And with Butler's chemistry issues, I think many of us thought that it would be more wise to re-sign Tobias than to re-sign Jimmy. But in the playoffs, when it all mattered, Jimmy performed maybe the best. He was probably their most consistent player in the playoffs, and Tobias drastically underperformed his expectations. So if I were Philly, I would keep Jimmy and let Tobias go, I think now, which is, I think, drastically different than what I would felt early in the season. And I agree with what you said, Kyle, about Brett Brown, because I was listening to the Mismatch today, and Chris Vernon said something like this, like, if they had won, the 76ers had won that game, everyone would be said, wow, what a coaching job from Brett Brown. Kawhi Leonard seemed unstoppable, and this is a better team, but they managed to win as the underdogs, and that a lot of credit goes to him. So I think you still have to give credit to him, even though they lost on that buzzer beater, and that shouldn't affect whether they keep him or not. So,
right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think Ben Simmons is probably the crux of the whole team going forward,
which is surprising. But
yeah, what do you think, Seth?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I could see if they could get something like really good for Ben Simmons to just like sell now. But I can also see maybe they just want to ride it out and hope that he develops into something, or they figure out a way to make it work with the pieces that they have, or that they get around him. It seems like with their 4 star players and JJ, they just very rarely would all of them be playing well on the same day. And I mean, maybe that's like part of it. It's like they're just banking on 2 of them playing well, and that'll be enough.
Yeah.
But ideally, you'd have a team construction where the players make each other better rather than just like relying on taking turns.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really difficult. I mean, even with the Warriors with KD, I think sometimes they just kind of take turns. Like sometimes Steph has a really good game, sometimes KD. Almost every game KD has a really good game, and then like we'll see who else. But with like the Warriors now, I think like Steph and Clay now, meaning since KD is injured, and looking back at what their team was like in 2015 and 16, it's like Steph and Clay make each other better, and they get open, and defenses have to worry about both of them running off of screens and stuff, and it makes it easier for the other players. And so obviously not every team can be the Warriors, but I don't know. I can see the Sixers just trying to mostly roll it back, and then they'll just continue to like exit the playoffs in the second round.
Well, I don't think Yeah, I think they. I mean, they can be a little hopeful because Kawhi might leave. Um, and so maybe the Bucks are their only real threat that they're left with.
That's just disrespectful.
Besides the Boston Celtics, of course, who can't even get out of the second round because everyone on their team hates each other. But
what a segue
we'll go over that later.
To the Bucks Celtics, huh?
Oh, I was going to go over Nuggets Blazers first, but yeah, sure, we can do that.
It's not the best it is for nothing, folks.
No, we'll go over Bucks Celtics. I have written down for this, Seth, do your Celtics eulogy, and Kyle jerk off the Bucks GM. So whichever one of you wants to go first.
Go ahead, Seth.
Well, I'm done with Kyrie. He was just talking up a storm about how he'll just turn the flip the switch in the playoffs, and he has all this experience. He's been in the finals before. He's been in clutch moments, and then he played like the worst games of his life when it counted most against the Bucks. And it's like he's not worth having on the team if he's going to be a terrible leader and also not be our best player on the court. So I'm really not sure what Danny's going to do. I could see them trying to run it back and maybe just getting rid of Rozier, getting rid of Morris, making a few small moves like that. And then I could also see this team being like completely different next year and trying to trade for Anthony Davis, giving up Tatum, Horford leaves, Kyrie leaves. I don't know. It was one of the more frustrating Celtics seasons in living memory. It's just not a real fun team to watch, and Kyrie's antics the whole season were just really frustrating. So hopefully next year it'll be a more likable team, and some of our young players will continue to develop, and Jason and Jalen will maybe take another step forward towards their potential instead of kind of a small step back or staying stagnant. So definitely discouraging exit to the playoffs, losing 4 in a row there to the Bucks. But I think also Milwaukee deserves a lot of credit. They're a good team, had obviously the best player in the series, and I still have some hope for the future.
Great points. I just peed for 2 minutes and I'm back. Didn't hear any of that, but I can only assume it was poetic. Kyle?
No, I agree with everything Seth said. You know, Kyrie, as much as everybody wanted him to be the guy for this team and be the leader that he said he was going to be, he was really the crux of the entire franchise this year. I said it in the middle of the season when he was missing games. This is a better team without him. And what we came to find out was it's kind of a true statement. Like, obviously, he's one of the best scorers in the NBA, but at the same time, he takes away from the team chemistry aspect of spacing the floor and, you know, making enough passes, passing the ball enough to make sure that the person taking the shot has a good shot, is either wide open or is cutting or getting to the rim. And a lot of the times it was just Kyrie, you know, wanting to play iso ball. I feel like we saw a lot during this series. I mean, he shot 8 for 22, said that wasn't going to happen again in the series, and then shot 7 for 22. So
he did it twice, and then in the last game he went like 6 for 21 or something.
Well, I mean, he wasn't wrong. 8 and 22 didn't happen again.
Right.
So
it was even worse the next time. Well, my only thing with Kyrie and the whole situation, I don't know if anyone touched on this while I was peeing, but I feel like, so you lose Kyrie, your team chemistry so much better. Everyone feels better about themselves. Whoever your starting point guard is, Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier, or someone you trade for, or pick up of, or draft or whatever. But then you're not going to beat the Bucks next year. I mean, without Kyrie, I don't think, right? So I don't know if there's going to be any different outcome.
Well, if Gordon Hayward is a different player next year.
That's true.
I need to know what happened to him in that series, because coming into the playoffs and after the first series against Indiana, I know, it's Indiana, he looked like the Utah version of himself. where he was assertive, he was driving to the rim, he was, he was moving the ball, and for some reason during the series, he just looked skittish. Every time he touched the ball, he immediately tried to just pass out and give it to someone else.
Yeah.
He wasn't that assertive self that we saw the last month and a half of the season for some reason, and we're not going to get answers as to why, but maybe did something go down in the locker room where someone, Kyrie, you would assume, said something about like, I need the ball. Who knows? We're not going to find that out, but
maybe he stepped on his foot.
Maybe.
Stepped on his toes. Literally.
Now, Kyle, did you mean to say he was skittish or Yiddish?
Oh, you didn't know?
Okay, he is Yiddish. Good, just making sure. All right, let's move on.
No.
Oh yeah, sorry, Kyle. Jerk off.
This is my time.
Jerk off the Bucks GM, please.
I know this is probably boring for some, probably most of our 5 listeners, but
Kyle, it's not boring to any of us. We love you, baby.
As we all know, I'm all about investing in innovation. And that's why Daryl Morey has been, a lot of people don't have a favorite GM in basketball, but Daryl Morey has been mine. He's just like, analytically, in my opinion, one of the smartest men in the sport, and kind of sets the trend, or has been setting the trend as to how basketball should be played at the most efficient level. And I was wondering the other day while I was laying in bed, thinking,
butt ass naked.
Who is the GM for the Bucks, and why does no one talk about him?
His name is John Hammond, right? Or is that the creator of Jurassic Park?
John Hammond was the GM before the current GM. So the current GM is John Horst, who 10 years before was shoveling shit by cleaning up abandoned and foreclosed trailers in trailer parks. And he worked for John Hammond when he was in college as like an intern, and Hammond got the job with the Bucks and hired him on. So this guy ended up being basically like his right-hand man, and was there and one of the front guys in kind of making sure that Giannis was the one they chose when he was drafted. And he loved Chris Middleton too. But I mean, John Hammond made those moves. But in 2017, so John Horst became the actual GM when Hammond left. And from there, this team is kind of when we saw transform into what is now basically statistically the best team in the NBA. Scoring wise, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA as well. And the first thing he did, he fired Jason Kidd. Incredible move. Passed on the interim coach Prunty and decided Budenholzer was the man for the job. So right off the bat, starting with a good foot. But then he assembled. He either drafted, signed, re-signed, or traded for 11 current players that are in the rotation on the team right now. And so it made me think, like, we talk about how Houston and Daryl Morey built their team around James Harden as a way to get Harden, to be the most efficient of himself as he could be, the most efficient scoring wise. And what Horst did in under 2 years was build the best team around probably the best young player in the NBA in Giannis, so that there's Giannis as the forefront of the team, obviously, might win the MVP this year, driving to the rim, kicking out when there's not a shot. And he's able to do that because the players that Horst assembled to be able to spread the floor and play very good defense. That was all they needed to do. But obviously, people weren't. That wasn't done before. So, I don't know. I just think we don't talk about the behind the scenes stuff enough, and it's people like him and Morey that are changing the game of basketball and how teams are constructed, and making it enjoyable for fans, even though they don't really. That's not what they really care about, you know.
Yeah, you're right. He deserves a lot of credit, and I think Giannis and Budenholzer have gotten most of it. So
one of my favorite stories when I was reading about him is that when he came to the team and they got Giannis, it was one of his jobs was to teach Giannis how to drive a car. He said It was some of the most frightening, enjoyable time.
That must have been fun.
Yeah.
Isn't that the guy Chris Vernon met at Sloan or something?
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know about him.
All right,
that's really good, Seth. I looked up a picture of him. He looks like me if I was. He looks like me if I didn't have a beard and if I had any hair to speak of on the top of my head and if I was less sweaty.
And you look completely different?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Why do you ask? Let's quickly hit Nuggets Blazers. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this was the other Game 7 from the weekend. CJ came up really clutch in that Game 7, scored 37 points. Evan Turner sighting. He was able to come in the fourth and give them a spark plug that they needed. Jokic certainly wasn't his fault that they lost. In fact, he averaged 29, 13, and 9 in the playoffs, which is pretty good, I think. And so I just have a couple things here. Any thoughts on the Game 7, and then any thoughts on the Nuggets' future going forward? Any offseason moves you see for them and what their future holds? Seth, why don't you go ahead?
I think Nuggets are looking good. I think both of these teams showed, that they belong in the conversation at the top of the West. I think we probably agree that both the Rockets and the Warriors are a step above them. Mm-hmm. But of course, a lot can change in the offseason as well. I love Lillard, or starting with Denver first. I think Jamal can continue to develop, hopefully be a little bit more consistent.
I like him a lot.
He was underutilized.
Team basic goes as far as he goes.
Right.
But Jokic is awesome. Love to see him. It would be cool if they got someone else on a podcast was talking about getting a bigger scoring wing for them, Tobias Harris type.
That would be nice for them. I think
that would be perfect.
And then on the Portland side of things, I think Lillard and CJ showed that having two guard players can get you pretty far, who are your stars, and they didn't have Nurk. So getting Nurkic back next year, and then I don't know if they'll have Cantor, but with the progression of Zach Collins, I think they've got a lot of good things to look forward to. And by all accounts, probably these two teams have some of the best cultures, team cultures, organizational systems, along with the Spurs. So I think that'll bode well for both of these teams in the future.
I'm just going to jump in real quick here. I loved what I saw from Jokic in this playoffs. I think a lot of people, this was his breakout year in the regular season. A lot of people said, okay, that's great, all well and good, but is it going to translate to the playoffs? And it definitely translated to the playoffs. He was one of the best.
He was better in the playoffs than he was.
Right, and he was one of the best three players in the playoffs so far, I would say, behind Kawhi and KD. So I think he's going to be in the MVP discussion for years to come, and I'm just excited to see him grow as a player, and he's one of my favorite players to watch, too.
I'm glad you've joined the dark side.
Oh, I've been there, baby.
I know you have. I was obviously had a very hard weekend with Houston losing and Denver losing. Two Stogie Boy sweethearts.
The bells of the ball.
I think it kind of shows McCollum has, on the Portland side, I think he's overlooked a lot because of Dame being on that team, but Dame didn't have it going offensively on Sunday in a Game 7.
Yeah.
But he did everything else on the floor right. And McCollum stepped up and did what he needed to do to basically will his team to the next round of the playoffs. I don't think it should be understated, though, that if it wasn't for the ghost of Evan Turner, they wouldn't have made it to this series with the Warriors.
They straight up reanimated his corpse.
But at the same time, I'm not surprised at what he did because Rodney Hood was doing the same thing all series, and that's kind of the glaring hole of the Denver team that they need to address this upcoming season. Bigger wing players that could drive to the basket.
Yeah.
They don't have anyone to defend that. Gary Harris showed that he can be an awesome defensive player when he's against different point guards or shooting guards. Right. And I think that's very encouraging going forward. And he was underutilized offensively. Gary Harris, Jamal Murray showed that he's a defensive liability, and that needs to be the biggest thing that he works on in the offseason. He was attacked not just in the Portland series, the series before. But Jokic just, solidified himself as one of the best players in the NBA, even at 22 years old. Like, maybe, the man scored, I think he averaged 29, 12, and 8, 29, 13, 8, something like
29, 13, and 9.
Even better. And
maybe the player they need is like the Jimmy Butler type, honestly.
Maybe. I think Tobias Harris would be a great fit, like Seth said. He plays great. He plays a great two-way game, and that's kind of what they need. They need someone to guard those bigger wing players on opposing teams. But one of my favorite things, even though Denver lost, was Jokic going to the podium and saying, I know this is a team game, but I can't help but think this is my fault. I don't usually miss free throws, or at least those big free throws, and I missed big free throws down the stretch in two pivotal games, meaning the overtime games, that 4 overtime game, and then game 7. If he makes one more of those free throws, I think we have a different discussion in, who's playing the Warriors right now. Mm-hmm. And I just think that shows at 22 years old in the NBA a lot of maturity, and kind of putting a whole team on his back, and that's just
definitely
awesome to see from a young player.
Yeah, you'd love to see that from your franchise player, especially as a young player. And it was great to see him being able to play big minutes in the playoffs because his conditioning and his
has been
his body type has definitely been in question. But he played 65 minutes in that 4 OT game, and he averaged 40 minutes I think for the playoffs.
I had an aneurysm that game.
He proved he could. Yeah, me too, dude. Let's just chugs his wine. All right, well, we've waited so long to talk about it. Kyle, your reckoning has come. Would you like to apologize to America for picking the Rockets to beat the Warriors?
I think we should wait until I'm home. I'll get butt-ass naked. You guys can grab some bells. I'll walk down the street, and you can just yell shame at me. It'll be my walk of atonement.
Yeah.
Good. We need that.
I still think, obviously, Houston should have won that series, especially with the Durant injury.
Oh my God!
You don't think they should have won?
They're just not as good as the Warriors, so no.
I think they had an opportunity to win, and they did it.
They were good enough, yeah.
I think the better team won.
Yeah.
So the thing with this was, honestly, I think I'm not going to straight out say the Durant injury helped them in Game 7. The Warriors,
6?
that is.
No, Game 7.
No, I'm talking about Game 7. But at the same time, I think the Durant injury helped the Warriors in Game 7.
So you did straight out say it, and you said the wrong game again.
No. I meant Game 7.
Of what?
Wait, so which game?
I'm half a bottle deep, boys. Cut me a break.
Get that grape juice off your hands right now.
Durant being out kind of reinvigorated
the 6, you might say.
Reinvigorated the 2015 Warriors of old. With a lot more movement with the ball. We didn't obviously have one player dominating in ISO possessions like we saw with KD the majority of the series. And not being able to focus on only one player was a huge problem for Houston because they didn't have the likes of, obviously they had PJ Tucker, but Trevor Ariza last year did a great job. And it's just, for some reason, they didn't have what it takes to pull out that win in such a pivotal game on your home court. Steph was electric in the fourth quarter. I don't think anyone was going to be able to stop him no matter what anyways. I mean, he scored 20-some points in the fourth? 23?
Yeah, he had 0 points at halftime, and he ended up with 33 right in the game, and most of them were in the fourth quarter.
23 points in the fourth quarter. Klay Thompson carried them the first half of the game. And I don't know what got into Draymond during the playoffs, but he looks like the Draymond of old again. And it's kind of concerning. I didn't expect that, obviously, going in to continue. And that's why one of the big reasons I picked Houston. But at the same time, we have to question what happened during game 5. Pardon me. Durant goes out, and James Harden takes a total of 3 shots in the final quarter of a game to tie the series. But
honestly, now I'm the biggest James Harden. I'll be the first to say that he hasn't showed up in the playoffs as much as I want him to, but I think he was good enough in Game 6. I don't think he certainly didn't seem to shy away from the moment. I mean, he went like 5 for 8 in the fourth quarter or something like that, and I think he played well enough to win in Game 6. So I'm happy with that from him. But I think that
but Game 5 was at that point the most important thing on their plate. And
that was odd, and that's another thing you have to add to Harden's resume. Is that he was 13,
or what was he? He was like 12 for 18 or 12 for 19 from the floor in the first 3 quarters, and then didn't take a single shot until about 5 minutes left in the game.
And when he doesn't take a shot, he's not involved at all. He just stands in the corner and he's no threat at all.
Exactly.
I texted you about this.
I know.
He checked into the fourth quarter with 7 minutes left. And from that point, he made 1 technical foul free throw, 1 layup, which is basically in garbage time, had 1 rebound, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it's assist, how is this the team? Maybe 1 assist, yeah. How is this the team where Harden had one of the highest usage rates in NBA history this year, and then in their most important section of the most important game of their season, he's just not doing anything. It was as if Durant and Harden got injured and missed the whole fourth. It was wow.
And that's what's been so puzzling with Harden in the playoffs is that, and he had a decent series, but he just doesn't seem to take the next step in the playoffs, right? He's always just a little worse than he was in the regular season. And that's my biggest knock on him. And that's why I just can't trust it during the regular season. Maybe there's something a little more defendable about it when you see him 7 times or, whatever, 6 or 7 times in a series and you get used to it. I'm not sure. Or maybe he doesn't get the same calls in the playoffs. Kyle will probably agree with that. But it just doesn't seem to translate as much as you'd like. But, if I'm the Rockets, listen, we got outplayed, and there's no excuse for the way we got outplayed in the end of the series, and our defense wasn't good enough. Clint has to be better. I mean, if they're he was a non-factor. He couldn't even catch a ball.
That was the most aggravating thing. And I'm going to catch a ball later
tonight, if you know what I'm saying.
The most aggravating thing watching.
Yeah, and Chris was on and off, and I just think that they just had to be better, but you're still pretty excited about the future because if Durant leaves, right? Maybe the Warriors are still the favorite for the title, but certainly not as prohibitive of a favorite. I would think about picking Houston in that series, especially without Durant. So I think they're still in a good place. I don't think they're going to make any huge moves in the offseason. Maybe try to add a little more defense on the wing.
Before we move on.
I was just going to say one more thing. I just love watching the Warriors without Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
I just love watching. At the end of the game, they would just do a Steph and Draymond pick and roll every time, and Houston just couldn't stop it because they would trap Steph. He would pass to Draymond, right? Which is, I guess, what you have to do because you have to make sure Steph can't get that pull up three. And then Draymond has several choices, right? He can go for the floater, he can lob it to Looney, he can kick it out to Clay, or he can stop for another screen and hand it off to Steph. And he just seems to always make the right decision, and that's the scenario where I really just love watching Draymond and Steph work like that because they're so smart and they've done it for so long together. It's just beautiful to watch, and I just prefer it over Kevin Durant isolation, which may be unstoppable as well, but just is not as aesthetically pleasing, I feel like.
Yeah. One things that I was thinking about in regards to Houston was comparing last year and this year. I think if you think about it, thing that could have happened to the team for last year's playoff run. Chris Paul was incredible all playoffs last year, and the way the team was constructed, it worked perfectly. But this year, Chris Paul wasn't himself for a lot of the season, and we saw even during the series that some nights it just wasn't his way. And I think without the trade, and they still had Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, this team of this year would have been much better off having those two guys and Pat Beverly than what they have currently. But last year, I don't think we could have said that.
Yeah,
I
agree.
I mean, Gordon was their second best player, and if you're playing a team where Steph is your second best player, and then your second best player is Eric Gordon, you're just not going to win. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Seth, any final thoughts on this? I know you always have final thoughts. That's why I always ask you, baby.
Let's just
I'm
move
excited
on.
to see what'll happen with both teams next year. But yeah, I got to go in a few minutes. So let's do rapid fire predictions on conference final round.
Okay, so let's do Warriors Blazers first. Full disclosure, the Warriors have basically wrapped up the first game. So
they'll probably win the first game. They're up by 20
with 5
seconds left.
So if anyone picked the Blazers to sweep, then I would be a little concerned.
Oh, right.
I picked Warriors in 5. I think I really realistically I could see this being a long series, but especially with Durant being out for the first few games. But I could also see the Steph and Clay and Draymond Warriors just saying, fuck you guys, we're good too, remember us, and just trying to really step on the throat of the Blazers and, come out to a 2-0 or 3-0 lead. So I'm more banking on that, and I think that the Warriors will get it done against them even without Durant.
Right. I agree. Much as I hate the Warriors.
Oh my God.
What's happening right now?
Kyle, you want to take my Draymond jersey?
Portland just doesn't have the firepower to keep up with them, especially once they get Kevin Durant back.
Yep. I almost picked this actually.
Lillard was 4 of 12 in game 1. He's just kind of in a little mini slump, it seems like. So if he starts hitting raining from deep, I think they could win a couple games. I have Warriors in 6, I believe. But yeah, it sounds like we're all in agreement on this one.
Yep.
All right. Well, then no need to fucking talk about it any further. Am I right, boys? Jesus. All right. So this is the series I'm most excited for. Bucks Raptors. You have Kawhi versus Giannis. 1 seed versus 2 seed. Maybe you could argue the 2 best teams in the league this year. And I'll just go first because fuck it, why not? I picked Milwaukee in 5, and then I said, wait, no, Kyle. Let's do Milwaukee in 6.
No, Toronto in 4.
So I feel pretty confident the Bucks are going to win this series because it wouldn't necessarily surprise me greatly if the Raptors won because Kawhi has been so good, but I just don't think that Lowry or Gasol or their other ancillary players have shown enough for me to have confidence in them beating a Bucks team that's so deep with Brooke and Chris. And okay, Seth is literally blowing his microphone. Is there something you want to tell me?
Gasol hasn't shown enough for you?
Not offensively, no.
worship at the temple of Marc Gasol.
I wash his feet as the disciple he is of me. Put the non-Christian kids to bed. I just don't think like offensively they're all just scared to take shots besides Kawhi. I feel like, and nobody in Milwaukee is like that. They have Bledsoe and Middleton and Brook who are not shy. So I'm gonna take the Bucks in this one. But I could see it being a long series, but I could also see it being a short series because it hasn't happened yet.
Oh.
Shit.
Kyle, what'd you
Can I
got?
say what I picked? I picked Bucks in 6, right?
Yeah.
You said 5.
Yeah, but
No,
then
he
I
said
texted
6.
Kyle and said, no, never mind, 6.
I think the series is going to be great. After what we've seen of Kawhi this playoffs and what we know of Kawhi in previous years' playoffs, this is when Kawhi is at his best, and he's going to be going against arguably the best player in the league in Giannis, and they're two different styles of play, which I think is going to be interesting. And Kawhi is one of the best defensive players there are, in my opinion. So really what happens when you have an unstoppable force and an immovable object? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, that was shockingly correct.
Poetic.
We're going to find out the series. I think the Bucks pull it out, but in our playoff pool, I also assumed that most people, if not everyone, was going to pick the Bucks, and I'm down by a lot of points, so I chose the Raptors in 6.
That's fair.
Playing the odds.
I have a nice cushion because I picked correctly in previous rounds, so I went with.
I had
whatever
one
thought was
game
gonna happen.
correct
Sam.
last round, or one series.
I wavered on this one. I was tempted beyond belief to pick Toronto, but just I didn't see enough, kind of like what Sam said in this previous series. I really felt like they should have taken care of the Sixers earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that if the Bucks shoot well from the outside, they'll be able to take control of the series. So I have the Bucks. I think I said 7 though.
The one thing about the Toronto side of this that I really like, obviously, is Kawhi, and that I have a feeling that Kawhi is thinking of this as this is my redemption to face the Warriors because of what Andrew Bogut did to me a couple years ago.
Pachulia.
Zaza. What Zaza did to me a couple years ago and took me out of a series in which they probably would have won because of the way Kawhi was playing.
They had a chance. I don't know.
It was game 1. Who's to say?
Yeah, but like we said, how Kawhi performs in the playoffs and just the players that he had around him on that team, plus the best coach in the NBA, I think they had better than just like a normal shot at beating the Warriors in that series. And I feel like Kawhi's the type of guy that's going to carry that with him and do all he can this series to get back to that stage to say, fuck you, Kevin Durant, fuck you, Steph Curry. I am the best player in the NBA.
He would never say
even though
fuck
he
you,
doesn't
any of them.
show
He's a robot.
emotion. He does. He did wear a shirt the other day off the plane that just said "fun guy" with a period.
Yeah, I did like that. It would be so poetic if Kawhi finally beat the Warriors, but it wasn't even on for the Spurs.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of nice. I kind of want that now.
He wins the championship and just leaves.
Yeah, that would be savage. I bet he wouldn't, though.
I think whatever the finals is, it's going to be fun to see either Kawhi versus Durant or Giannis versus Durant, assuming KD comes back healthy.
We have a lot to look forward to.
We have a lot to look back on, but nothing in the present. Any final thoughts, boys? Oh, do you realize this is our 16th episode?
The present is a present, and that's why it's the present.
I can't believe we've made it 16 episodes. So we just call it quits now?
Probably.
No, I think we call it NBA Lottery Reaction Playoff 2 Round Recap Semifinals Preview. Holy shit, Kawhi, I have a semi.
I have a semi, yeah. To be clear, I'm half flaccid, half erect.
He does not own
charged.
a 16-wheeler.
All right, any thoughts before we close it out?
How dare you ask me that?
I don't think so. I think all we got is without Freddie Adu, something happened on the third day.
I think Freddie Adu rose from the dead after I killed him.